Hi guys, and welcome to my WCW Starrcade 1997 pay-per-view review. Starrcade was held at the MCI Centre, Washington DC, December 28, 1997. It was the big one, the granddaddy of them all, the final pay-per-view for that year that saw Sting take on Hollywood Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. No one had seen Sting wrestle for many long months. He had been hiding up in the rafters, attacking and taunting the NWO at will over this time. This match had one of the best build-ups you will ever see. It was awesome. There was also a lot of other great action at Starrcade that year. We had 3 other major title matches, plus WCW Nitro was on the line with Eric Bischoff taking on Larry Zbyszko. So a loaded card, an awesome pay-per-view. Let's get to all the action, guys. Okay, so the first match of the night saw Eddy Guerrero, the Cruiserweight champion, take on Dean Malenko, the challenger. Both men entered the ring focused, and the matchup was brutal. Malenko infuriated Guerrero early on in the match and chased the title holder out of the ring. Taunting Guerrero, Malenko managed to get him back in the ring, where Guerrero took the upper hand and punched, raked, and stepped on Malenko's face. Coming back, Malenko threw Eddy onto the ropes, then delivered a devastating clothesline to his opponent. The punishment did not end there. The man of 1,000 holds used a very elementary one. He lifted Guerrero high in the air and threw him face first onto the mat. It was all Malenko from there until Guerrero found Malenko's weak spot, his knee. Working over Malenko's leg, Guerrero sandwiched it between the steel steps and the ring post, weakening Malenko, but not enough to thwart a Malenko tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, powerbomb, and a cloverleaf attempt. Managing to weasel out of the cloverleaf, Guerrero went up top, drop-kicked Malenko's weakened knee, then went for the frog splash and the win, holding on to the title. The winner here, Eddy Guerrero, retaining his Cruiserweight title, and a great match here to start off Starrcade 1997. So next up was scheduled to be the match between Kevin Nash and the Giant, and this actually turned out to be a non-matchup. The two Giants were supposed to battle it out to find out who the real Giant truly was, but instead of Nash, Scott Hall came out to the ring. Telling the crowd that Nash was not there, he gave the Giant the win by default. The Giant, furious, came out and said, "Hey, if I had to wrestle me, I wouldn't show up either." He then sent a powerful message to Nash via his outsider partner, headbutting Hall, then body slamming him to the mat. The Giant went for the chokeslam on the helpless Hall, but instead decided to use Nash's trademark finisher and jackknifed Hall with such force that he was left lying on the mat, out cold. The Giant walked off with a promise that Nash will get his. Winner here, Giant by forfeit. Okay, so next up we had the 6-man tag team match between Team NWO and Team WCW. Team WCW consisted of Ray Traylor, Rick and Scott Steiner, and they had Ted DiBiase accompanying them at ringside. And they took on Team NWO with Scott Norton, Vincent, and they needed a third member for their team, and that third member ended out to be none other than the Macho Man, Randy Savage, as a surprise third member for Team NWO as he came out with Liz, and that got this match underway. And there was no respect in this match as Scott Steiner and Randy Savage started out by spitting on each other and slapping each other in the face. Double teaming was the order of the day for Team NWO as usual, but Team WCW held their own as Scott Steiner butterfly powerbombed and body slammed Savage, then cleared the ring. Using Liz as a shield, Savage thought he was away from the wrath of Scott Steiner, but Liz was quickly picked up and set aside, and Savage was manhandled on the outside. Back in the ring, Vincent seemed to be the target of Team WCW and was slammed to the mat by Ray Traylor. All three WCW members jumped in the ring and delivered a tremendous amount of punishment to Vincent, who was a victim of a vicious DDT and a Frankensteiner off the ropes by a very aggressive Scott Steiner. It was all WCW until Savage became Team WCW's next victim, and Norton thwarted a Frankensteiner attempt to the Macho Man by Scott Steiner, and Savage, crafty as ever, executed a vicious flying elbow onto Scott for the win. The winner here, Team NWO. And the next matchup was between Bill Goldberg and Steve Mongo McMichael from the Four Horsemen. Now, this match was actually scheduled to take place at World War III the previous month, but McMichael took matters into his own hands on that night and used a lead pipe on Goldberg before that match even began, leaving him lying helpless in the back room. So unable to wrestle the previous month, Goldberg was out in full force, ready to seek revenge on his attacker. Wasting no time, Goldberg attacked Mongo on the ramp, where a brawl ensued even before the bell rang. Throwing McMichael into the ring, Goldberg set up a table against the steps for later use, then took out his wrath on the ex-bear. After brawling and grappling, Goldberg scissored McMichael's leg in a submission hold, then went after Mongo's leg again, weakening his opponent and setting him up for the ride that soon followed. Outside the ring, Goldberg set up the table he had brought to ringside and attempted to throw McMichael over the ropes into the table, but was wisely stopped by the referee. However, Mongo would go through the table anyway as Goldberg pushed him off the apron and threw the table on the floor at ringside, smashing the table in half. Staggering from the blow, McMichael found himself on the receiving end of a Goldberg jackhammer, giving Goldberg revenge and the win. Okay, well, this next matchup was Chris Benoit versus Saturn in a Ravens Rules no disqualification match. The original match was meant to be Chris Benoit versus Raven, but Raven would come out to the ring saying he can wrestle who he wants, where he wants, and when he wants. And so he sent one of his flock members, Saturn, into the ring with Benoit for the usual no disqualification Ravens Rules matchup. Now, Benoit, chomping at the bit to get at Raven after weeks of wrestling Raven-appointed substitutes, gave a stiff elbow to Saturn in anger. From there, a brutal brawl ensued, with Kidman getting a smack to the face off the apron when he tried to interfere for his flock mate. On the outside, Benoit went after Kidman, but was slammed by Hammer as Raven stood taking it all in at ringside. Saturn managed a DDT on the weakened Benoit, and a Saturn moonsault off the second rope left Benoit nearly defenceless. The Canadian crippler, a real tough nut of course, came back time and time again from the brutal punishment and double teaming of the flock and managed the crippler crossface on Saturn on the outside of the ring. At that point, the entire flock attacked Benoit as Saturn used a version of the Brainbuster on the gutsy Canadian. Back in the ring, Benoit called for his patented swan dive off the ropes, but was once again thwarted by the flock. Fighting off the vicious gang, Benoit stood tall until Raven stepped into the ring, delivered a brutal, even flow DDT, and he just stepped back as Saturn applied the rings of Saturn for the win. So the winner here, Saturn by submission, but he really had no chance in this match, as it was virtually Benoit versus the entire flock for the entire matchup. Alrighty, so next up we had Buff Bagwell versus Lex Luger. The WCW Total Package against the NWO's version of the Total Package had seen a disqualification and a count-out loss for Luger in previous weeks, and this time Luger was not about to be thwarted in his attempt to prove who the real Total Package is. Strutting to the ring, Bagwell posed, but Luger body slammed the NWOer and sent him flying to the outside. Walking off and calling on Vincent for support, Buff reluctantly re-entered the ring and got serious. Luger, however, was ready for whatever Bagwell had in store. Outside the ring, Luger threw Bagwell into the ring post and then the guardrail and back into the ring to inflict more punishment on Buff the Stuff. Vincent attempted to interfere on the apron, but was handed a Luger smash to the face. Bagwell managed to apply a sleeper hold on Luger, but the Total Package refused to submit and revived, delivering 2 hard elbows and a clothesline to Bagwell. Each time Bagwell took back the match, Luger countered. As the crowd screamed for Luger to rack Bagwell, the ref was knocked out by an accidental collision between Luger and Bagwell. Without an official to see, Luger racked Bagwell, but then enter Macho Man Randy Savage, who saved his fellow NWO member, and was rewarded by a Luger body slam and a visit to the rack. Then Scott Norton would run in, and he saved Savage and knocked out Luger. Laying an unconscious Bagwell over Luger, Scott Norton quickly escaped the ring as the ref started to come to. Seeing what he thought was a pin by Bagwell, the ref counted to 3 and gave the win to Bagwell. The winner here, Buff Bagwell, hell of a dubious win over Lex Luger. Alrighty, so next we had the big US title match between Curt Hennig, the current holder. He took on challenger Diamond Dallas Page. Now, DDP had not forgotten Hennig's betrayal of him earlier in the year, and he now had a chance for retribution and the US title. Starting strong, DDP threw some wild punches and kicks to the US title holder, but was thrown outside the ring and slammed into the steel steps by a vicious Hennig. Now back in the ring, Hennig kept up the punishment by ripping at Page's taped ribs, then walking on his back. Later, DDP, ever resilient, managed to pull out of a long and very strong Hennig chokehold as he delivered a bone-crunching jawbreaker to his rival. The brawl was taken into the crowd when DDP threw Hennig over the barrier. Back in the ring, Page scissored Hennig belly first around the ring post, inflicting amazing pain on the NWO tough guy. Calling for the diamond cutter, Page was thwarted by a fast-thinking Hennig, but managed an armbar takedown on the champ that served only to weaken both men. At last, after thunderous chants from the enthusiastic crowd, DDP got the diamond cutter on his foe, slammed him to the mat, and pinned him for the win and the US belt. And Page, a true people's champion, then left through the crowd with the belt held high as Hennig threw a tantrum in the middle of the ring. Winner here and new United States champion, Diamond Dallas Page. Really great matchup here. One of the matches of the night in my view. Okay, next up a match with a lot on the line. We had Nitro on the line, WCW Nitro, as Eric Bischoff took on Larry Zbyszko. We had a special referee in this match, and that was Bret Hart. So Bischoff, weeks earlier, had agreed to step in the ring with Larry on one condition. If he won, the NWO would get Nitro. So a lot on the line here, guys. Ever confident, though, the living legend Larry Zbyszko took Bischoff up on that offer, and history was in the making as the two literally decided the fate of Nitro in the ring. And with the crowd solidly behind Zbyszko, Eric came out with Scott Hall. After being thoroughly frisked by referee Hart, the match was on. Larry looked to be in fighting shape and was very ready to rumble, but Bischoff bobbed and weaved his way through the first part of the match. Tiring of Eric's stall tactics, Larry moved in and went after Bischoff viciously. Yanking the hair of the leader of the NWO, Larry managed to get Bischoff face down on the mat, but was quickly pulled off the stunned Bischoff by Hart, who seemed to stop every offensive move that Zbyszko had in store for Bischoff. On the outside, Zbyszko threw Bischoff into the steel ring steps, then rolled him back in to inflict more punishment. A solid punch to the face of Bischoff was stopped once again by Hart, who was beginning to look more NWO as each passing moment of the match went by. Undaunted, Larry took a bevy of blows to the head and replied with a solid kick of his own, a suplex and a swinging neckbreaker to the delight of the WCW crowd. Eric was hopelessly caught up in the tree of woe, and it looked like Larry Land was not far away when Hart once again interjected. As Zbyszko and Hart had words, a cunning Scott Hall jumped on the apron and loaded Bischoff's boot with a metal block. Eric then flattened Larry with a kick. Although referee Bret Hart had not seen the foreign object used to smash an unsuspecting Zbyszko, and after some heated words, flattened Bischoff with a punch as the crowd roared in approval. Hall jumped into the ring and attacked Bret Hart, who countered with a clothesline and a vicious sharpshooter, causing the NWO tough guy to tap out almost immediately. Larry, revived and furious, choked Eric with his own karate black belt, and Hart, releasing a limp Hall from the killer move he perfected long ago, raised Larry's hand in victory, leaving the NWO, Eric Bischoff and Scott Hall, lying helplessly on the mat. So I remember watching this match for the first time, and you were thinking that Bret Hart was NWO during the entire match, but he actually turned out to be WCW. Larry Zbyszko and Bret Hart had won WCW Nitro back, and as a fallen Eric Bischoff and Scott Hall comforted each other in the ring, the crowd let them know what they thought of their antics with a collective chorus of jeers. WCW had prevailed. The winner here, Larry Zbyszko. Okay guys, now the main event of the evening, the match that was 18 months in the making, the big one. The reason everyone was there for Starrcade 1997, they had not seen Sting wrestle in such a long time. The franchise of WCW. And it was Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. He took on the challenger Sting. Now, earlier in the evening, J.J. Dillon had declared that through a random drawing, Nick Patrick would be the referee for this title match. Now, this left many skeptical, as not too long ago, Patrick was a bought and paid for NWO referee. But Dillon declared that Patrick fulfilled his promise of being fair and equitable and was no longer on probation with WCW. This night was highly anticipated for well over a year, as Sting had retreated to the rafters after watching the NWO destroy all that was good about WCW. This night he had come to right the wrongs of the NWO. Billed as the match of the decade, the fervour and anticipation was high. Sting, the obvious favourite, came out to a bevy of lightning and laser effects, as well as thunderous fireworks. Once the cheering had stopped, it was all business for Sting and the long-time NWO champ. Hogan had a surprise arsenal of moves waiting for Sting as he got the fan favourite into a headlock and then clotheslined him onto the mat. Sting replied with 2 drop kicks and a headlock of his own. Exchanging clotheslines, the two went after each other with amazing force. Hogan was hell-bent on holding on to his long-time world champion status, and Sting was determined to unseat Hogan, and in essence, the entire NWO. A Hogan thumb to the eye of Sting sent Sting to the outside, where Hogan, eyeing the ever-present baseball bat that had become Sting's trademark over the months, threw Sting into the announcer's table, then delivered a hard slam with the bat, and followed that up by smashing WCW's hero shoulder first into a steel ring post. Taking amazing punishment on the outside, Sting attempted a Stinger splash but missed, and landed painfully onto the guardrail. Back inside the ring, Hogan was not letting up, and he delivered his patented big boot and his big leg drop to Sting. But before anyone knew what had happened, Nick Patrick had counted to 3 and was signalling for the bell to ring. As the crowd yelled in protest, Bret Hart ran out and he stopped the bell ringer, then announced that the count was far too fast and that no one would ever be screwed over by a referee again. Of course, Bret Hart had just been the victim of the Montreal screwjob very recently, and he said that that would not be happening again. Patrick, clearly back on the side of the NWO, tried to argue his way out of his predicament, but was greeted with a punch from Hart, who then threw Hogan back inside the ring and ordered the match to restart. Sting, revived from the beating he took on the outside moments earlier, went after Hogan with a renewed vengeance. As assorted NWO members hit the ring, Sting managed to keep the ring clear by throwing them all outside. At last, the silent hero used his patented Stinger splash and slapped the Scorpion Deathlock on a beaten Hogan. Pointing to Bret Hart, Sting held on tight as Hart called for the bell and declared Sting the rightful winner of the match and the WCW World title. Hearing this, the entire WCW roster entered the ring, packing in to support both Sting and WCW, and the celebration was on. WCW had truly won the night, and Sting had finally fulfilled his silent promise to WCW fans everywhere. He had unseated Hogan and the NWO. The winner and new World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. So that was WCW Starrcade 1997. We'll round it all up here with a bit of a sum up of the pay-per-view and my thoughts on it. It was definitely a top pay-per-view in my eyes. There was a lot of good pay-per-views in WCW in 1997, and this was definitely up there as one of those top pay-per-views. There was a lot of good matches on there. There was a lot of good wrestling on there. And of course the Sting-Hogan match, which had been built up for so long, one of the best build-ups ever to any match in wrestling history. That was over a year-long build-up, with Sting coming out, not wrestling, just showing his face in the rafters, and that piece of history with Sting and the NWO is one of the biggest pieces of wrestling history, really. One of the most exciting, and just the whole build-up to the match was really awesome. They had Sting's entrance with the lighting and the fireworks, and it was just so anticipated, that match, and seeing Sting, unreal. I thought the match itself didn't really quite live up to the hype. I felt, though it was a good match, if it had just gone a wee bit longer, wrestled for a wee bit longer, it could have been so much better. I feel the match was just a wee bit too short. It was definitely better than their rematch a couple months later at Super Brawl 8. It was definitely superior to that match, I thought. Although I thought the match at Starrcade was good, just really needed to go just a wee bit longer, just to get a wee bit more out of it, and the match was just too short in my eyes. But it was still a good match, but it could have been so much better. Some top matches of the night. Definitely DDP vs Curt Hennig was one of the top matches. DDP's first major title, first ever US title in WCW, so that was huge. That really got the crowd going and amped up if they weren't already amped up enough to see Sting and Hogan in the main event. And that just carried on, of course, with the next match with Larry Zbyszko and Bischoff, with Larry winning there as well. So yeah, 2 WCW wins on the trot. The crowd was really amped and pumped up. By the time Sting and Hogan came around, the thing was just fever pitch, so that was awesome. So yeah, DDP Hennig was cool. I love the 6-man tag as well. It was really awesome. And the very first matchup, Eddy Guerrero versus Malenko. That was a really good Cruiserweight title match. Good match there to kick off the whole pay-per-view. And the Sting Hogan match was good too. As I say, I just think it was a bit short in the end, but that's all. But there we go, guys. There's all the action. Cheers for checking it out, and catch you next time.